how long have you got to talk to us today, Andrew?
As long as you like. Within reason, as long as you like.
4 hours.
We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read. Oh.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast. Today, we will be continuing our look at the disavowed era of G.I. Joe from Devil's Due, and specifically, we are currently in the middle of exploring G.I. Joe versus Transformers, Volume 4, Black Horizon. It was published as a 2-issue miniseries from Devil's Due, January and February 2007. Now, talking to me about it will be a special guest, a very secret special guest that maybe a thumbnail might give away, but I will not be talking to that person alone. I will be joined by my co-host, as always. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners. Let's bring in our guest.
And here he is. It's artist Andrew Wildman.
Hey.
Hey. Hi, Andrew. So good of you to join us and talk Joe with us, most significantly.
You're welcome. Yeah, great to be here.
It's fantastic. So you're joining us I think it's almost like 4 years or something since last time you were on Talking Joe, talking with Chief and Chris, and that was very much focused on your introduction, breaking through into Marvel Comics UK, and how you then transitioned into working on the G.I. Joe title and your personal title. So I guess the intro is that most people who are G.I. Joe fans will know you from that, significant run that we had, issue 120 through to 138. But you also made a mark on books such as Transformers, X-Men, Spider-Man, Venom. You've got your own comics projects like Horizon and Oxygen. And beyond that, you've made a splash in the world of TV and production design, storyboarding, video games, and a co-creator of a preschool animation series, Shane the Chef. So you've been a busy guy.
Yes. I have been a busy guy. Shall I show you how busy I've been over the last 40 years?
How can you illustrate your busyness? Please. Oh, crikey. So it's takes its toll.
Don't ever draw comics for a living. It'll ruin your chances of being a superhero.
Are you in pain right now?
A little bit, not much. It comes and goes, which is why I wear this occasionally. Not all the time, though. Not all the time. But yeah, it's a little bit more challenging than it used to be physically. It was always challenging mentally, but no, physically it's a little bit challenging. But hey, I'll keep going.
That wrist support, is that just when you're drawing, or is that almost a permanent fixture?
No, I don't wear it when I'm drawing because it kind of gets in the way. It's basically, without getting into too many medical details, this is what they call trigger finger. So it's the tightening of the tendons down here. It's pulling that down. I've got arthritis in my thumb, and it kind of impacts down my wrist as well. So I occasionally wear this because it's got like a metal band in it. Just stops me kind of moving the wrist around too much. But I take it off when I'm drawing. It's fine. I can draw. I couldn't do like a full, I mean, back when I was drawing Joe, I was doing a lot of work back then originally for Marvel, doing a hell of a lot of work. And at one time when I was on Joe, I was doing 2 books a month. So I was doing X-Men Adventures at the same time as doing G.I. Joe. The lap. Bless Stephen Baskerville for always managing to make some of my very rushed artwork look, as powerful as he could possibly do. So that was amazing. But yeah, that was a lot of work. So I was pulling long days to get that amount of pages done. These days, because I don't do comics so much, I tend to work a slightly different way. with the storyboarding, it's as much about thinking as drawing. So I can ponder before I draw, rather than just comics, which is like draw, oh my god, yeah. So so it's a bit easier.
I think Larry Hama has or had trigger finger.
Really? That's because he actually had a gun.
He also drew for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Before he was best known as a writer or an editor, he was a busy freelance artist. Are those guitars on your right?
Yes, they are. I would like to say I play them a lot, and I really, really don't. So the one in the green case was, I had that at school when I had some guitar lessons at school. This one, pretty much my first day when I went to art college. First day at art college, when my grant came through, when they used to pay you like a grant rather than having to fund yourself, a chunk of my grant went on that guitar, and I still have it. But I don't play much, no, at all. I play drums. I've played drums for years. So
are you musical? do you play in bands? Do you meet up with musicians?
So as I just said, I play drums. So no, I'm not. I am the joke in the band, like 4 musicians and a drummer. I am musical. I can't read or write music, but I've always been musical and always been involved in music in some way or another. Even on a couple of albums. So, well, probably 3, 2 with one band, 2 with a different band. So, but I love drumming. Yeah, always loved drumming.
And over your other shoulder, we can see a sort of miniature clapperboard. So is that a relic from working in TV on Luther?
Oh, you storyboarded for Luther.
Yeah, so I storyboarded season 5 of Luther, which is the final TV season, and I did that with a director called Jamie Payne. He was directing the whole of season 5, and I'd worked with Jamie previously on 2 episodes of Doctor Who. So I used to do a lot of storyboarding on Doctor Who for various directors. A director will tend to come in for sometimes 1 episode, but usually a block of 2 episodes. So I worked with various directors, and then I worked with Luther on an episode called Hyde. This was back in the Matt Smith Doctor Who days. So there's an episode called Hyde, which I worked with him on. We got on so well that they asked Jamie to go back and direct one of I can't remember the name of it. It was called Night of the Doctor, I think, around about the 50th anniversary. They had kind of various episodes that led up to and tied in with the big anniversary episode. So they commissioned him to direct that, and he didn't really have time to do it, and he said, I'll direct it, but I want Andrew to storyboard it. And I was busy, and Jamie at the time lived near London. I live up in Chipping Norton. Don't know if you know your UK geography, but so I'm up in West Oxfordshire. So that's a good 70 miles outside of London. And the Doctor Who studios are in Cardiff. So we were just like all over the place, geographically it didn't make any sense. So he spoke to Marcus Wilson, who was the producer at the time. And what he arranged with Marcus was, I want to do it with Andrew. I don't want to work with any other storyboard artist. Bless you, Jamie. And so the only way we could put that together is if we met on a Friday at the restaurant of the top of the Waterstones bookshop in Piccadilly. So on a sequence of Fridays, we would meet up there. I'd frantically make notes and do little doodles and then go away and sort of board it all up, And we managed to do it. It was tight on the schedule, but we managed to do it, and it was a great episode. Anyway, so I had a good relationship with Jamie, worked with him on a number of other shows, The White Princess, I can't remember, quite a few shows. And then when he was commissioned to direct season 5 of Luther, the producer said to him, you'll need a storyboard artist. And he said, oh, I've got a storyboard artist. And they're like, well, we've already got a storyboard artist. So he said, no, I want to work with Andrew Wildman. And the producer went, Andrew Wildman? What, the guy that used to draw Transformers and G.I.JOE? and he was like a massive like comics fan, so he was like, yeah, okay. So I did that, and the producer said to Jamie, he said, okay, I'll let you do that on one condition. And Jamie said, what's that? He said, I want you to arrange for me to be able to meet Andrew. so we met for a beer and had a great chat with him, and he's been a friend ever since. The producer was Derek Ritchie. Yeah, so he's done a load of stuff, but he was great.
So with the understanding that a freelance illustrator may always be looking for work, or the job after the current job, keeping that in mind,
Yeah.
and that a variety is the spice of life, I feel like there has long been this idea, and maybe it's very different now, that comics were here, TV was here, and movies were here.
Okay.
In a kind of pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about being a professional and working in these different fields? Have you aspired to move up, or as an illustrator, to sort of what's interesting, what pays?
Well, for me, there was a kind of thinking back, and I've done this previously, spoken about this previously to some people, not many. For me, when I was very, very young, interested in comics and cartoons and all that kind of stuff, I had an interest in comics hugely, and also in animation, and it was always going to be. I always dreamed that, because it's no way given when you have aspirations to work in the arts, it's never a given. It's good luck and the required ability. So when I got to college, it was the same kind of thing. My personal tutor at college was an animator, became a well-known director of kids animations. In fact, he co-created Reboot. Do you remember Reboot, that sort of CG animated show? Yeah, so that was him.
Brendan McCarthy or someone was involved in that. There was a UK comic artist who was quite hands-on in some of the design.
I think he was a concept artist. Andrew, who are you referring to?
I'm referring to. So the show was called Reboot, and the guy who co-created it was a guy called John Grace.
Yeah, it was like pioneering CGI cartoon. It was, yeah.
It was.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Which became very relevant later on in life, because it was the same studio that did Beast Wars,
right,
the CG Transformers Beast Wars.
Interesting.
And eagle-eyed Andrew Wildman fans will know, of course, that you drew a BotCon exclusive Beast Wars comic book written by Simon Furman. I think that was for BotCon 98, maybe it was 97. Please continue.
Okay.
So this range and this perhaps pecking order.
Yeah, so it was always that I would do one or the other, but clearly my work was far more to do with comics, and my love of comics increased. Everything I did when I was at art college, I was criticized for it always looking like a comic book style. I didn't really want to do anything else. I mean, I did enough to pass the course. In fact, when the external examiners came in to judge the degree show, so the degree show at art college had two judging panels. One was the tutors that were at the college, and then the second kind of mark would come in from external assessors. So they'd be people from design agencies and whatever, all that kind of stuff. And I can remember one of the lead guys from a London design advertising agency coming up to me, looking at my work, and his only comment was, "Why are you wasting your time with this subculture?" So I was like, well, A, I hope it's not a waste of time, and B, because I love it, and C, because that's why I'm here, because I used to draw, in my spare time, I'd kind of do little drawings of comics and stuff. But through my career, I did have a love of storyboarding. You didn't really see them very often, but I remember seeing a magazine article or I can't remember what magazine or a book or something. And it had got some of the storyboards in from Greystoke, the Tarzan movie from the 80s, I guess. And the illustrations in there were by Martin Asbury. So Martin Asbury used to do a comic strip called Garth, a newspaper strip called Garth. So he was well known as a strip illustrator, but he'd done these storyboards and they were amazing. And I thought, oh, there's opportunity to maybe do both at some point in my life. The reason I ended up doing storyboards was because, as we all know, hit the mid-90s and the comics industry just crashed. And so out of necessity rather than design, I got out of comics. And then I worked in computer games. So I went initially as a freelancer, but then on staff, I worked for a company called Rebellion, who are like a big games company now. They were very small when I joined them. And one of the things that I did, apart from designing characters, designing environments and props and all that kind of stuff for the modelers, you know, to make, was I used to storyboard the little cutscenes that are in between levels, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So I used to storyboard those. And then it was after I left Rebellion and I got back into comics, I guess Black Horizon came up around in that period where I was sort of back into comics for a while. But I got a phone call from a guy that I had worked with 10 years previously at Rebellion with. And in that intervening 10 years, he had left Rebellion and he'd set up his own visual effects company in London. And they were working, doing all the visual effects for a BBC horror show called The Fades. So, and they needed some storyboards. And he said, oh, you used to do storyboards at Rebellion. We need storyboards. Can you do some? I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I met the director and did all the storyboards for that 6 episodes season of The Fades. And then it kind of lulled for a year or two. And then that director that I'd worked with got in touch with me and said, I'm working on another TV show. I really enjoyed working with you. Do you want to do some storyboards for me? And I was like, yeah, great. That'd be good. Because, you know, my work in comics was sporadic and times were a bit difficult as a freelancer for me. So I said, yeah, I'll do that. What is it? And he said, Doctor Who. And I was like, I'm in, you know. And ever since then, live action storyboards have been a lot of what I've done. But I've also worked in animation storyboards as well. They're quite a different discipline, although they're both storyboards. They have a very different demand on you. But so for me, it wasn't necessarily a deliberate career step up. For me, it felt like more like a step sideways. And I think for an artist, I mean, you can think, oh yeah, you know, TV and movie, it's really sexy and all that kind of stuff. But essentially you're drawing all day. So it is largely creatively a step sideways as much as anything else. But nice just to do something different. You know, to have a second career was great.
And what difference does it make to you as an artist that your comics are so much more, I guess, accessible to the general public? There, it's a one-to-one relationship almost, that they're seeing your art on the page, whereas the storyboards are through a filter of so many other creatives. Does that element of your art being seen more widely have much impact in your creative process or thought process?
In terms of what you're doing in the course of a day, no, because you're like comics. As much like if it's a childhood dream, then you're like, hey, you know, I'm living the dream and I'm like a comics rock star. You know? And so you can, you know, your ego can go ride on that wave for a while, but essentially you're just sitting down for 8 hours a day drawing. So I get your point. Yes, I mean, as storyboards, they're not seen. Like what you do is not directly seen by the public, whereas comics is more. I mean, it does get inked and it does get coloured and all that kind of thing. So it does go through a couple of other levels, but nevertheless, yeah, your work is seen. But different artists will have a different view of that. My view is it's a job of work with an end result, and you're charged with doing the best work possible for the end result. And I think in some ways, you know, if I had, and I mean, comic artists are a strange breed, you know, they're very solitary at home. So they're not necessarily the kind of people that in their daily life, you know, mix with a lot of other creatives. Back in the day, comic conventions were few and far between in the UK. There was one, and then there were two, and I think we reached three at one point. So, but because they were such rare occurrences, all these creatives who were squirreled away in their own little studios, creating, they turn up at the conventions. They'd have their ego massively massaged, and then socially they go absolutely mental in the evening. Just drink themselves into a stupor. But there comes a point where you have to kind of grow up a little bit, especially when, like me, I was married and had a family relatively young compared to some other creatives. So I just had to get serious about it. And I wouldn't say it just became a job of work, because I love all of it. And it is nice to have some kind of profile. But at the end of the day, you're a creative, so you're creating for an end result. And you get credit on TV and movies, even if Netflix goes with the credits. You can't read them. But nevertheless, you are there, so you are kind of acknowledged. So I was just with conventions, I was just gonna add an extra little sort of note there, which is, as much as they kind of fed that, for me, having worked on books that have become classics, like who would have thought that Transformers and G.I. Joe would still be around now? So for me, in the following years and now, I go to Transformers conventions and all that kind of stuff. So I still get the feedback one-to-one from people, and that's always a joy to meet the people that have read this stuff. So yeah, that kind of feeds your soul.
I was going to say, we normally at the beginning of our conversations talk about the space that the creators are in, and we've seen some things in your background here, but in Tim's background this episode, there's something that's particularly sort of jumping out. So I wonder if we can zoom in on Tim, and you can show us what you've got behind you.
That's what you got, Tim.
This is Andrew Wildman's cover to G.I. Joe 125, and I bought this from Andrew. Andrew, when you showed up at BotCon 97 or 98, those couple of years you attended a BotCon or two.
Yeah.
And you were starting to sell some pages, but you were not selling covers. This is like a specific thing. And at the first or second BotCon, I believe you brought some Transformers covers, and they were on display, and including the wraparound cover to the collected edition of the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover.
Yeah.
The one that Herb Trimpe had drawn in '86, and you did a new cover with Baskerville. And then fast forward another 5 years, and through your website, you said to your mailing list, I'm putting up some pages, I'm starting to sell some covers. And Eco Warriors Flint is not my favorite Joe, but I like how pulpy this cover is. It feels unusual for G.I. Joe. And also the Toxo Viper, the Toxo Zombie, which is a Toxo Viper who's turned into a zombie, is actually never introduced in Larry Hama's G.I. Joe, but is set up in this issue and also on the cover. I also like the dramatic underlighting and the sort of forced 1-point perspective.
Oh, there it is. Look, there we go.
Oh yeah. Hey, where'd you get that? Where'd you get that scan?
I was just
Is that from my blog? Where'd you get that?
Around your house with a. I think that might have been from. Andrew's website at some point. Had the covers up, and your covers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you inked all of those yourself rather than having them inked by Baskerville, I believe.
Yeah, generally I inked all my covers. Yeah, just general. I don't know, Transformers.
I think maybe Black Cat. I think one or two of those Baskerville inked the covers, but like at the same time, Spider-Man: The Arachnus Project, and then I think Spider-Man 2099. I think Baskerville inked a couple of those covers, but then also some of those issues you didn't do the covers, someone else did.
Yeah, right. I mean, these ones coming up now, these are all inked by me.
Look, 121. That's one of the best G.I. Joe covers
Yeah.
ever.
Thank you.
And really nice color on that one as well. Did you know, Andrew, that this art got used on a shoebox to sell some G.I. Joe shoes?
No, I
Some
didn't know
G.I.
that.
Joe Ninja Force shoes.
Fantastic. Why didn't they send me any?
They might not have been available in adult sizes. I'm not sure.
If they don't have to, they don't want to.
Yeah. Before you segue, can I just join in the fun? Hang
All
on.
right.
Oh, please.
What's going to happen?
Please. Are you playing guitar?
What have we got?
Oh, all right.
Transformers. Is that
I don't know what you're saying because I haven't got headphones on.
Scorponok versus
Yeah,
someone?
so that's one of the few Transformers covers that I've still got. So it was interesting, Tim, that you said that I said I don't sell covers, and I don't sell covers, but I have sold some of some of the titles I've worked on. But I've sold all but one or maybe two Transformers covers and all but one G.I. Joe cover. And the reason for that...
The longer you wait, the more they'll sell for.
No, it's not that at all. The reason I sold the Transformers cover... I sold the G.I. Joe artwork first, I think. A lot of interior artwork of G.I. Joe. And then I sold Transformers stuff. I have two daughters, and they both needed weddings paying for. Falls upon me as the father of the bride to come up with the cash for the wedding, and I'm like, I don't have any, so I'm afraid I had to dig into the archives and let them go.
So did you said you sold all but one? Was there a specific one that you held on to? Was it held on as a favorite, or is it just the one that happened to not sell?
Yeah, I don't have it to hand. The G.I. Joe cover that I kept was the one with hockey mask, snake eyes, kind of leaping towards camera. He's got a sword behind him and
135.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's part.
Oh, there we go. That one.
Excuse me.
133.
Excuse me. 133.
Yeah,
that's not part 1 of 4 of Ninja Force. Excuse me.
No, that's the one I still have.
You know, the colors on this cover always struck me as very Paul Mounts.
Right.
The colors on this cover don't, to me, look like the colors of sort of any other Joe issue, and I don't know if anyone knows who colored it, but I'll just wrap up that thought.
Yeah. Bit of homework for the listeners.
One of the things that sort of jumps out looking at the original art is some of the effects, the analog effects that were used back in the day to create some of those things, like the overlay onto, I think this is 126, the Firefly cover with the montage of moments from the past, which looks like it's been done on tracing paper over the top and blocked out in red lines. So you can kind of see how art and technology of the day sort of combining together.
Yeah, very much. And because I trained at art college, I trained as a graphic designer. I didn't do much graphic design, but I know all the tips and tricks with graphic design. So yeah, that's what in comics they call a color hold. So if you wanted something all the line work to be in a particular color, they would ask you to draw that on a separate overlay. So all those little inserts, I think, were in blue line, printed in blue line. So it's what's called a color hold.
Because what you're asking the production people to do is to not treat everything you drew in black as something that will become the black plate. You're asking something on another layer to become a part of the blue plate or the blue and the yellow plate.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. I mean, now obviously it's all, do what you like and it's all sorted out in Photoshop or whatever. But back then it wasn't. It was, as you say, Mark, it was analog.
I have one of your pages from, I think, 138, where Megatron shows up at the end of the Ninja Force story. And there's a Zipatone overlay that's like white dots that's used to make something that you've inked in black sort of appear more like a gray, like it's been pushed back.
Okay.
And I was like that kind of kind of zipatone effect.
Yeah, it was somewhat ironic that just as the Transformers join the world of G.I. Joe, that's the point at which you leave the book and someone else comes on board.
Although eagle-eyed Andrew Wildman fans will know that after he drew Megatron in issue 138 of G.I. Joe, he then drew 2 pages of Transformers Generation 2 featuring Snake Eyes and some Joes.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, you still draw some G.I. Joe and Transformers today. So you've got sort of contact details on your website for commissions, and obviously appear at conventions as well. And seeing the updates from Facebook, that there is a continuous trickle of people wanting to see new sketch artwork from you covering various G.I. Joe and Transformers characters. So it definitely still part of your world.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I was between TV shows, had a lull between commissions, to board a TV show, and I thought, well, I either do a lot of DIY or I just find another way of just drawing and getting a bit of a revenue stream. So I put a shout out just saying I'm taking commissions. So yeah, so quite a few of those came in. It was nice. It's always nice to. I did get to a point after comics, and then when I was fully into TV and all that kind of thing, where I just thought, I'm largely done with this. I'm done with those old characters, etc., etc. But it does when people commission something like that, you think, oh, that would be quite fun to delve back into, meet those characters again. So yeah, I do enjoy doing those. Yeah.
I was going to say as well as commissions, that's not the only thing on G.I. Joe you've been working on, because we did see your art cropping up on the cover to Scarlet issue 1 from Skybound. So can you tell us about how that came about?
It was somebody just emailed me sort of out of the blue, and he said, "Hi, so this was one of these exclusives for a particular comic shop or something."
Yeah, like a retailer exclusive.
Anyway, he got in touch with. Yeah, so he got in touch with me and said, would you be interested in doing da 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 da? And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds like fun. So I said yes. We negotiated a fee because part of the deal was that he wanted to essentially buy the original artwork, which came up with 2 things: sort of negotiating a fee that would work, and also because everything is digital that I do these days, apart from sketches, everything is digital. So I thought, okay, so I need to do like proper old school piece of artwork. So that in itself was an interesting thing to delve back into, to do it, ink on board, because he was buying it, so he wanted the physical product. And that was the result. I used some of the techniques that I use in boarding, which we may get into later, I don't know. But I really enjoyed doing that. I would have liked to have coloured it as well, but he had a colourist in mind. And so there we go. It came out as it did. But it's nice to have seen the original artwork, people to see the original artwork, because I did a very linear job. My work is very linear. Like you were saying earlier, Tim, on the cover that you've got in the background there, the G.I. Joe one, how it was kind of pulpy and a bit noir and, uplighting and those cast shadows behind people. So, back in the day, there would be areas of black to really sort of, just to get it to sit on the paper really nicely. But these days I have more of a, what they call a lean clair style, more sort of European, very, very lots of line work. No, very rarely any solid blacks. So it's quite nice to do it that way. So it's quite nice for people to see the artwork, because obviously once the colour's on, you don't necessarily get so much of a sense of that. So
could you color this yourself and make a print of it and sell it on your website?
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to
take away from the store exclusive. How about when they sell out? When they sell out of their 500 or 1,000 copies?
Yeah, 1,000. Yeah.
Or
Yeah, maybe.
you just for conventions, print 50.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you talk about this transition from analog art to digital art? Because when you were penciling comics for Marvel UK and for Marvel, it was pencil on boards.
Yeah.
And then at Dreamwave, or for Dreamwave, you weren't there physically. You did a Transformers miniseries in 2003, and this was called The War Within. This was with Simon Furman, and this was really interesting because you drew comics a certain way, and now it was through the Dreamwave filter, which was like for Dreamwave, characters were penciled and inked, backgrounds were penciled, characters were colored like animation cells, and backgrounds were kind of painted to look like animation backgrounds. And I think for your miniseries, I think your characters are penciled and your backgrounds are inked, or anyway, it sort of half looked like you and half looked like Dreamwave, which was really interesting. And by the time we get to this is not your cover. By the time we get to Black Horizon, I'm looking at this, and you are credited as artist. And I was thinking, reading this for today's episode, I was thinking, okay, well, Wildman's penciling this and inking this, or he's penciling this and then he's inking digitally. I don't know if people were inking digitally in 2007. So, as a general statement, can you tell us about transitioning to digital tools and what that gets you? Drawing with a stylus.
So, well, my first kind of foray into digital, not drawing digitally as such, but my sort of introduction to the whole digital world was fairly early on. It was probably in 1995, maybe. Yeah, 1995. So that long ago. So, so there was a number of other British artists that I was good friends with. You used to hang out with each other at conventions and all that kind of stuff. And one of those was John Higgins, who's does all sorts of stuff. But now he'd done the colouring for Watchmen, and after that he was working in a studio with some other people in Luton in Bedfordshire in the UK. Just not working with them so much, but it was a building where there were lots of different studios, and he was renting some studio space there. And a lot of the other people there were artists of different disciplines, and they were using Macs, and they were using Photoshop and all that kind of thing. And he absolutely loved it. So he took a deep dive into all of that. Was very interested. And he said to me at one point, you need to get a computer and you need to get into digital, because sooner or later it's going to go this way. I mean, colouring was becoming digital. Lettering, I mean, Richard Starkings kind of introduced the whole digital lettering thing, and there was no way back after that. So when digital is introduced, it very rarely goes into reverse. So he told me what I ought to buy. He gave me a shopping list. So I went to the nearest computer store, and I bought an Apple Mac, and I bought a copy of Photoshop. And the copy of Photoshop was, I think it was Photoshop 3. So it was the first version of Photoshop that had layers. Like, prior to that, it hadn't even had layers. And so he came over to my house where I was living at the time for the day. So I fed him and provided him with beverages. And he just gave me this great long tutorial and sat me through how to use Photoshop and how to operate the Mac, all that kind of stuff. So fairly early on, I was into all of that. And then certainly when I was working at the computer games company, I was using a lot of digital technology for different things, some modeling and little bits of animation and lots of Photoshop, lots of layered Photoshop files, etc., etc. But that didn't impact on my comics work initially. If I was coloring anything, I would scan it in and color. But in terms of drawing, I carried on with traditional techniques. The War Within stuff was on Bristol board, and I would pencil it and then FedEx it over. Would I FedEx or scan? Maybe scan and send. I think we were at that point then. That was a big step digitally, rather than sending physical artwork across the Atlantic and keeping your fingers crossed. Yeah, we were kind of scanning and sending it over. So the War Within stuff was penciled, and then, as you said, with the Dreamwave method, they would ink the foreground characters, and then those foreground characters would be coloured in Photoshop. But the backgrounds, they wouldn't ink; they would just use the pencils that I'd done. So they asked for them to be tight, all of the pencil work to be tight, and then they would colour it up from that. To be completely honest, as much as it was great to work with Simon again on a Transformers book, and great to delve into that kind of prehistory, all the Cybertron stuff, artistically, I loved drawing it, but I wasn't overly happy with the result. One of the key things that happened when it changed from the old 9-sheet colouring method, which, you're aware of what the 9-sheet colouring method was, I guess.
Yes, but tell our listeners.
Okay, well, in a nutshell, so the role of the colorist was to have a photocopy, a photostat, as you call it in America, probably still. So they would have a photocopy of the inked artwork, and then they would have a box of marker pens. Like these days, people use Copic markers for doing sketches and artwork, don't they? But so the process was essentially that they would have a collection of the pre-Copic. They were magic markers, I think, something like that. A number of coloured pens that covered the whole colour gamut of what you could get in comics. And then there was a chart that would tell you what was the print breakdown of any one of those colours. So like if a colorist would colour something in blue, they would have to then put an arrow to that area of blue that they'd coloured in, and it would say whatever it was, 80% cyan, 20% yellow, or something like that. So then all that information would then be sent out to all these little old ladies out in middle America somewhere, and there's this whole kind of cottage industry of colorists that there was in America at the time, and they would have sheets of acetate, and each one of those color breakdowns, so each percentage of each color, so 4 main colors, cyan, magenta, the 3 colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow, they would know what the breakdown was. So they would do one sheet where they would, I think it was they would do it in red. It was like a photo fast red that they would color that area in on one sheet for all the things that were 20% yellow. And then they'd have another sheet for all the things that were 50% yellow, and then another sheet for all the things, whatever, like that. So you ended up with nine sheets of acetate.
3 colors. 3 colors, 3 percentages.
3 percentages.
25, 50, 70.
I don't know what the exact percentages were, but that was essentially the process. So they had to do all that. So they were breaking down essentially what the printing plates were going to be. So then those sheets of acetate, each one of those would produce a printing plate. And then when all of those are printed one after the other, it would layer up the percentage colours in ink on the finished printing paper to give you the colours that you see. Which is why it's all sort of seen as, it's dots. That gives the percentage. It's, it's a hell of a thing, isn't it? But, analog requires some very creative thinking. So the difference with that was that you would have very bright, very clear colours. Might be a bit dotty, probably dulled by the quality of paper that it was printed on, but nevertheless, they were very, very pure colours. They then introduced something which they called K-tones. So they would introduce percentages of black. You would only get percentages of black previously, like you said, with zipper tone. So if you'd have an area where, the inker would put in a dot black to give you essentially a grey, they started to introduce those as well as another kind of layer in the process, just to get some more shades. Then when we jump into digital color, one of the things that a lot of people who are technically great with computers and great at handling all of that, but don't understand, is that in art, you absolutely minimize the use of black. Whenever you're mixing a color as an artist, if you're mixing acrylics or whatever, you never use black. If you're an artist who's had proper art training, the darks you would get from the mixture of, dark greens and blues and whatever you'd mix, that's to get dark colors, but black you would use very sparingly. But when they're choosing their infinite amount of Photoshop colors that they could use, they tend to darken things by putting black in it. And then when it's printed, the whole thing just dulls down too much. So War Within for me was very dark. I'm not saying that that's what happened to it, but there did tend to be a tendency for people who wanted something to be a bit emotionally dark would put in too much black, and then the whole thing would just get muddy, very muddy looking.
15 years later, there may still be some colorists in comics who know Photoshop but don't know color theory, who are still using too much black.
Yeah,
it might be happening even in 2024.
I think it does, and that's what separates, that's what separates the good colorists from the ones who are not necessarily bad colorists, but possibly less informed and are technically proficient, but probably don't have an artist's sensibilities in a way.
All right. So in this timeline of you and digital tools, right?
Yeah.
So War Within, you're still drawing pencil on boards.
Yeah.
But I also know that around then you're doing some Transformers covers for Titan, the British publisher that is reprinting 6 issues at a time of the Marvel Transformers comic. You're doing new covers for those books, and you're doing some CG backgrounds.
Yeah.
So can you keep going along this path of from analog to digital?
So I would be drawing on, not even on board, on layout paper. I was drawing the characters, so you'd have all the central characters to make up that montage. I'll be drawing those out and then lining them up, not with brush and pen like proper old school art, but with liner markers like people do now. So I'd made that jump. So I was lining those up. So that was all black line artwork on separate sheets of paper, which I was scanning in, layering those up in Photoshop, purely so that it was easy to move them around, get the right, resize and get the right composition of all those kind of main characters. But some of the backgrounds were drawn as well. But I was also doing some CG models, some Photoshop effects, bits and pieces, like very basic CG models. I wasn't particularly proficient, but some, There was an old, if I remember rightly, some of the things I was using on those covers in the backgrounds used an old package, which I don't think is around now, a package called Bryce, which was a landscape generating package. I mean, it was an amazing piece of kit. I mean, now it's very, very basic, but it essentially used what are called bump maps. I won't explain bump maps. People need to go and look that up. But essentially, it's grey tones that create a CG digital elevation on things. So I was using some of those with different textures to get certain things, some of the background stuff going on, sometimes bits of treated photographs or whatever. So yeah, that was a very digital process, but still built around hand-drawn artwork.
And then at a certain point, you're just drawing with a stylus. You're just drawing directly onto a tablet. Your comics or your storyboards.
I didn't make the digital jump in terms of drawing, and I might be wrong here. I might have used a proper old school tablet to do some, but that has the whole complication of drawing here and looking at the screen. So it's like, it's like drawing like this. It's just such a disconnect there that it's hard to do that. So I didn't go fully drawing digitally until I got a Cintiq, which is a tablet that is also a monitor, so you can actually see what you're doing. I can't think when I first started doing that, but it was relatively recently. I also had another slightly, having worked in an animation studio, that influenced how I was drawing comics, and how I'd done work in an animation studio, and that influenced how I drew the pages of Black Horizon.
Can you be specific? Because
I can.
so when I look at this,
Yeah.
the actual line work to me, I think that is pen on paper, but I feel like you might be penciling loosely or with blue line pencil and then inking with you tell us, because this art I'll do the cover that's yours, not the Tim Seeley cover. I can tell it's your style because of your shapes. Your line quality is very different. 5 years after War Within, which is very different 5 years after Marvel US. So how did you draw Black Horizon?
I will show you.
All right.
So 15 field animation paper, which is essentially A3-ish, which in American would be kind of 11 by 17, but it's a lot wider than that. So you're absolutely right. On animation paper, I would do blue line work, because that's a very animation thing for roughing out. Yeah. So that's the blue line, roughed out in blue line.
Okay.
And I would on an animation board, which is essentially a drawing board with a circular piece of frosted perspex on it and a light behind. So it's essentially what they call a light box in an animation studio. So that sheet, there's a whole load of pages here that I've put together. So this is just a whole load of pages that were done in blue line. So I do the whole comic in blue line on animation paper. So then that sheet of paper, you can see the holes there that go on the peg bar, which is the thing you have on an animation table. That sheet of paper would go onto the light box. Then I'd put another sheet of animation paper over the top and basically trace it off, but in detail, but not in ink. It's pencil. It's very, very clear, sharp pencil.
Okay.
So there's no ink in the whole process. So that would be scanned in to Photoshop and then just tightened up.
When you say tightened up, you don't mean retouch. You mean darken your dark grays so they become black.
Yeah, just pull the increase the contrast so that the lines become sharper.
Right.
Yeah, but there probably would have been some little bits of touch up, if things had got some fluffy edges, but essentially that's just high contrast pencil artwork.
Do you, Mark? I was going to jump into a working with the writer question, but I feel like I've asked 4 questions in a row. So
yeah, so I think we're very much in the sort of Dark Horizon space now. We've landed.
Wait, Mark.
Sorry,
Black,
I keep
Black
on
Horizon.
saying Dark Horizon, and I've written it on my notes, which is why my eyes keep on going there. And Black Horizon, I've heard somewhere else the story of how you got the job. So I wonder if you could quickly tell that story. So how did Black Horizon actually happen? I can tell a story if you can't remember.
You're gonna have to tell it.
Tee him up.
So I understand that you sent almost a cold call email to Into Devil's Due. So, I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm an artist. I used to do some G.I.JOE. Have you got any art going? And they go, well, as it happens, we've got this project coming up that might be up your alley. Do you think you want to give it a go? Something along those lines. Does that sound familiar?
That sounds very. Yeah, that sounds very likely. So what year were we talking about?
This is
2007.
You drew it in. You drew it in 2006 because the splash page of Joe Colton in issue 1, where he's in prison and has tick marks. The tick marks for the days, and then here's your signature with an 06.
Cheeky, like he wrote that on there. Yeah, okay, 2006.
And this is 2 issues, and they're double-sized. So it's 4 issues.
Yeah, and I understand
so-
that the original thought was to actually have it as 4 separate issues. There might be a logical break point somewhere in the middle of each story.
So that is an interior page of the book, but it was actually, I don't know if you can see this, it was page 1 of issue 4.
I see.
Which is why it's a splash. So,
Be like the
so that
opening
was originally, I was commissioned to do it as 4 issues.
And I think I've got a quote that explains that. So Tim Seeley said that it wasn't really a choice for us. It was decreed that with the movie coming out, the first G.I. Joe movie coming out, everyone had to wrap up their version. Oh, no, sorry. This must be the Transformers movie. Everyone had to wrap up their versions of Transformers to make way for the film versions. So the 4-issue mini ended up being 2 48 pages to get it out and done ahead of time.
Get it out. Yeah.
Andrew, do you remember that and there being any schedule crunch? Or over a 40-year career is asking about any one project having a tough deadline, asking like, do you breathe oxygen? I'm just gonna assume that at a certain point, some pages took a little less time than other pages.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember any of that. I mean, I was obviously commissioned to do as 4 issues. So the whole kind of combining it to 2 was something that I was not necessarily aware of. I think I just did it as the 4 and then sent it in, and then for whatever reason that editorial decision was made. I can't remember whether it was a crunch. There may well have been. I mean, if there's any pages in there that look a bit rushed, I apologise.
Sorry, that's not what I meant.
Okay.
What I meant was, at the end of the month, many comic book artists think, "Oh, I have fewer days and still some pages." That's just in the organic way.
What strikes me as a reader of this, though, is how much is packed into it, how much story, how many characters, how many Easter eggs, how many little cameos, and it feels like that was asking an awful lot of an artist.
Yeah, I mean, if they're in a book like that, if there are Easter eggs and if there are cameos, it's like, guys, send me some reference, because I don't know all these characters. Obviously, I know the main ones, but so I would have. In fact, because I've got these here, because I had in a folder, in this here folder here, I have all the blue line pages, I've never sold any of this, all the blue line pages, all the pencil pages, reference pages.
Whoa. Hey, it's Monstructor. Oh, it's the scripts.
Doodles on there for the page I was working on, little notes about, resolution to scan things in at. I mean, pretty much every page has got a doodle on it, little sort of thumbnail layout. So there was all that kind of stuff. I don't know. What was that for? Was that in the book? It might have been me just quickly designing something that was described. Yeah, so it's all in there. This is the whole process is in here, all the scripts and everything. Oh, look, that's an interesting one. Probably not. It's interesting to me. Just because of what we've been... This is the script for issue 4. So there's the thumbnail of the page we were looking at.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Honk. Sound effects. Honk. Prime. Move aside.
So yeah, still got all that stuff. So yeah, cameos I would need reference. Easter eggs, I'm sure they asked for them and they had to say, okay, so what we want you to do is this, and I'd be like, why? I don't know, just do what I'm told.
I feel like a sentence that is embedded in this whole interview that we haven't yet said aloud is that other artists had previously drawn G.I. Joe and Transformers crossovers.
including the writer Tim
Herb
Seeley.
Trimpe.
So,
Good points. Good point. Very few, maybe two or maybe one or two other artists had drawn G.I. Joe and also drawn Transformers, and so
Right.
so as it is a wonderful convergence that you were the artist who drew this series, and I remember as a fan when this came out, I had stopped reading the other Devil's Due G.I. Joe comics. They weren't quite to my taste. And when I saw your name on this, I thought, I'm in. And also because it was a different continuity, you know, it would be easy to dip my toe in because it wasn't the main Devil's Due continuity. I didn't want to say like there's only one artist who could draw this crossover because many artists are professionals and can do many different things. But there's a lovely convergence that you, who had drawn quote regular Transformers and quote regular G.I. Joe, and then like a specialty Transformers, did this project.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about the character of those scripts? Or more generally, you know, you have worked with some writers many times, and you've worked with some writers just a few times. You know, you had a long run with Furman, and then back again, you had a long run with Larry Hama. This is Tim Seeley, who was a staff artist at Devil's Due and had written and drawn for Devil's Due a bunch of G.I. Joe stuff. And there are other writers that you've worked with at Marvel and other publishers. Is there, if not specifically about this script by Tim Seeley, is there something that you look for in scripts, or some things that surprise you when you have drawn some comics?
It's quite interesting. I'm just looking at the script, one of the scripts here, the script for issue 1. So the thing that jumps out to me, having worked, you know, my first Marvel US work was Transformers, and then I moved on to G.I. Joe. So those books were pretty much back to back. Because they were Marvel books, the thing I had to engage with on Transformers and get used to was Marvel plot style. So all the UK work that I'd done was full script. I guess, you know, your listeners will be aware of the difference. So Marvel UK books, full script. So I was talking to Simon the other day, and we were talking about that very point. And for him going on to write the Transformers book for Transformers US, he had to get used to doing plot style, because that's what Jose Delbo was used to drawing from. So he thought it's only fair to carry on the way that he's been doing that. And then obviously I had to get used to plot style, and all the Marvel stuff I did was, as far as I remember, all the Marvel stuff I did was plot style. So it was interesting when Black Horizon came in and it's full script. So Tim's literally written it, page 6, panel 1. Joe pushes Chokpar out of the way as bludgeon sword cuts into the ground where he just was. SFX, shunk, Joe, move! You know, it's literally that. It's everything. It's all laid out for you. He describes what he wants and what the dialogue is. So having a script where people are literally laying out the dialogue as well was something that I hadn't had for a while. I mean, plot style, they'll suggest dialogue, although we'll write it if it's a very, very key thing. The advantage with plot style is that you can go a bit crazy, you know, you can get really creative with it, which is why Stan Lee came up with that as a thing. So his artists would have more free reign, and it was probably quicker for him to write plot style. And then based on the art, he'd go, okay, these words, you know, and then he'd just come up with all the dialogue. So it's a great way to work as an artist and as a writer. But maybe on a book like this, I mean, I can only assume that that's how Tim preferred to write. And the advantage of that is the writer can, on a book as complicated as Transformers and G.I. Joe, sometimes you really do have to nail it down. You know, so many characters, so many things going on. So it made sense for him to write it like that. I had to do less thinking, but you can still play around with layouts. I mean, I'd throw the layouts around and choose when to have a big panel and when to have a smaller panel, and all that kind of thing. So that's the first difference I noticed, and I can only assume that at the time I thought, oh, here we go, full script, interesting, you know.
Presumably that Transformers miniseries War Within for Dreamwave. Oh, well, maybe not presumably. That was Simon Furman.
Yeah.
Do you remember if that was plot or script?
I don't remember. It could have been either way. I mean, given that Simon, you know, being British, he might have said, I may have some somewhere, but I'm not sure. He may, I don't know, but he may well have chosen to write it full script for the same reason that he wanted to get all that stuff in there, you know. I don't remember.
I think the observation is that if you weren't going to have something close to full script on something this complex, this many characters, giving you loads and loads of reference, you would just drown because as a reader I felt almost overwhelmed by the amount of things happening. It sort of almost unusually so for a comic. It felt like it felt like I can't think of the right word. Sort of just trying the language to kind of to explain the sort of the amount of stuff going on. You've got to be paying attention to it, and it's amazing that the story and the execution is as clear as it is, given everything that's going on. Tim's probably going to try and reword what I'm thinking in a slightly more articulate way.
I have 2 or 3 takes on this that are okay. So I feel like this only works if you have read the previous volume 3, that Tim Seeley wrote, right, Mark?
Yes, he drew volume 2. He wrote volume 3, The Art of War, which sort of ends with Hawk having these being exposed to the Matrix, and then that resulting in the powers that he's got in this story. And part of the story that he tells is that actually this was probably the story that he thought he would probably have as volume 3, but it was too out there, and they said that he couldn't do it, so they had something slightly more conventional for series 3, and then gave another tried this one another time. What did he say? He said it was actually the original story for volume 3. At the time, the pitch was turned down by Hasbro, and Josh Blaylock suggested I rework the story with Serpentor. So I did, had a really good time. And then when I pitched Cobra and Unicron this time, it was all approved, because volume 2 finished with this final page of introducing Cobra, something that wasn't explored in the next series, but we did have this strange sequence with Dr. Mindbender in sort of lobster lingerie across state.
This is the final page of volume 3.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Because it says the end.
Okay, all right. I will take back that statement. You don't have to have read volume 3 to understand volume 4, but it's analogous. You have to have a lot of familiarity with Transformers and G.I. Joe both to understand Black Horizon. So that's my top-down reaction. Number 2, although it is 4 issues worth of comic, it really wants to be 5 or 6. And were the previous crossovers, were they more issues than 4?
I think they might have been. I think some were 4,
they were 6.
I think maybe one was 4, one was 6, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And then my third, so I counted, and not counting like a random nurse or a random secretary, but the marquee characters who either get toys or are like known G.I. Joe and Transformers supporting characters. Issue 1 has 38 characters, and that is a double-sized comic. So congratulations, Andrew, for juggling all of that. You are a professional. But also, Tim Seeley makes it work. It does all make sense. There are like mini character arcs. Some characters get little chances to shine. There are a couple jokes. There's some in-jokes. There are some fun cameos. It does all make sense. And it does have a sort of a broad canvas in time, because it starts in the 70s with, Adventure Team G.I. Joe. But in terms of sort of the emotional satisfaction, the narrative satisfaction, it feels like Marvel Phase 5 in the cinematic universe, where there are so many characters to introduce and include that instead of having a story with like 3 main characters and 4 supporting characters, and they all get to do like a bunch of things and really grow, you have 38 characters, and like a lot of them are sort of checking boxes. And I say this sort of lovingly. I really like this, but this really is for fans. And and sort of my extension of that comment is, here's an example. In the second issue, Unicron shows up and transforms, and Flint inside Cosmos, a flying saucer, go into Unicron's mouth and throughout his body and to his brain so that they can defeat this terrible evil. And each of those are things that would want like a full page of physical space and like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 panels, just geography to let the artist like show step by step and give the reader some sort of some getting used to it and some heft, but also like sort of clarity, like the 3 panels of Unicron transforming, they're not allowed to be given a lot of space. And if you have seen Transformers the movie, you're like, oh, I know what's happening. I'm going to sort of substitute the like long dramatic buildup of music and scale, this scene in the animated movie, and I'm sort of going to apply that here because the comic book, it's actually in issue 2, doesn't have enough space to show it. And similarly, like when they get to, those 3 panels, like I like those 3 panels, but this page is asking a lot of sort of everyone, you know. It's like, okay, a human is in space for the first time and sees the like evil planet who's like come up on the horizon of Earth, and the dark god transforms. It's like, oh, each of those wants like a page or 2. You know, like compare this to this. It's a Jeff Senior splash page, but in issue 75 of the U.S. Transformers comic, when Unicron has transformed into a robot and he attacks Cybertron and he just thrashes it with his arm. He's so big, he gets a 2-page splash.
Yeah.
So Andrew, you have my I very much enjoyed seeing you juggle all of this because it's a lot.
Yeah, it was. Well, I don't remember it being. I'm just looking at it again thinking, wow. I mean, even the script, you know, so many pages have got 6 panels. I mean, I was just bumped into one there and got like 8 panels, 7 panels. That's quite a lot. But I mean, he's described it. The descriptions on here are very concise. That's a disadvantage with doing... So with plot style, doing a book like Transformers or G.I. Joe, plot style can be more writing than full script because they're having to describe so much rather than because they don't want you to go off piece. You're like a superhero book, Spider-Man, right? You got Spider-Man and maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 villains. And an understandable environment, and so you can, you know, if you're writing plot style, you can describe that fairly easily and quickly, and the artist gets it. Oh, right, got that, yeah, you know. But yeah, this takes a lot of description. So, but Tim did describe it, each thing quite concisely. It's quite nicely described as an artist. I don't remember, but I would imagine that I probably had some questions, but probably not a huge amount. But then I was familiar with the material, even if they're slightly different characters. Yeah. I get the material.
Yeah, if this was all new, that would be a level beyond.
No, you just wouldn't. You send it back and say, "No, I'm busy." Yeah.
When we've done some interviews with artists, some of them have said, you know, when you get on a new book or property, it takes a couple issues to get used to the characters, to feel confident in drawing them, and you know, this idea that you've already done all these characters before for other publishers, for other books, even though you need reference, and even though there are some specialty locations like Cobra Law, like you can hit the ground running on a series like this.
Yeah, to a degree. Yeah.
It's worth calling out. We've not mentioned it yet, but this is basically the only appearance of Cobra La in comics. Yeah, without getting into too many semantics, that up until the towards the end of last year, when Skybound launched their Cobra Commander series, which featured Cobra La prominently, and had some similar themes in terms of how they approached the character of Nemesis Enforcer, which was interesting as well. So it was if you wanted Cobra La, this was the comic book to see them in, because big character, big part of G.I. Joe the animated movie, but not really seen in comics up to this point.
Andrew, did you have any affinity for the 1970s 12-inch Action Man, such that when you get to draw him at the beginning of this, and also later in this miniseries, I mean, I know that character had shown up a little bit in the Larry Hama G.I. Joe, but not just a brand that you were returning to, specifically the 80s Real American Hero, but the 60s, 70s guy.
Yeah. I mean, that was my go-to toy. Yeah, back in the day, Action Man, as it was in
the UK.
In the UK. Yeah. No, I had a ton of that stuff. Yeah, definitely did.
Do you remember when these two issues, when they were published? Do you remember any kind of reaction? Did you go to a convention soon after that? I mean, I know that there's this stretch of time where you're out of comics and then you're back into comics a little bit, but do you remember sort of how this felt or what happened as you finished?
Generally, I would say, so at that time, in terms of conventions, I don't know what conventions I would have been doing around then, but I probably wasn't doing any general comic conventions. If I was doing any, it would more than likely just be Transformers conventions, and given when that was, probably fairly small ones in the UK. So I don't really remember it showing up all that much. G.I. Joe, because we don't have G.I. Joe conventions, so in the UK, some people will come up, like Chief used to come up in a Transformers conventions, and they would ask me to sign G.I. Joe comics, and but it was not all that often. So I don't know whether generally it didn't make an awful lot of impact over here. You might know better, Mark. I don't know, but no, I don't remember it making much of a. I wasn't aware of much of a splash. Don't know.
Yeah, we had the Action Force. We had like Battle Action Force, and then we had Action Force Weekly from Marvel, and then sort of your era of G.I. Joe was, I guess, direct market only, and we didn't necessarily have in the UK that quite the affinity with the G.I. Joe branding, and you'd have to seek it out from the specialty comics. So by that point, for the UK audience, I guess the circulation would be relatively small, but for those people that were exposed to it, I think it had a long lasting impact. Such as me and Chief and various other people who were actually collecting it and reading it at the time.
Yeah, because here in the UK, we're just like one big family.
It's a smaller community. So we've got a smaller bunch of G.I. Joe fans, but we do have like the roll call and a place to go. So like it's smaller,
yes.
but it's definitely it's concentrated. There's a concentrated enthusiasm of those people who really hold the torch for the brand in the UK.
Yeah, I had it was a roll call. I can't remember which one it was. I've been to 2 or 3 of those maybe. And there was one that I went to where Larry came over.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't all that long ago. I can't remember when exactly. And that was the first time I'd seen him since I'd met him in America when I went over when I was doing G.I. Joe. So it was a long period of time. And when I met him in America, the kind of 2 or 3 times that I met him over there, I was younger and a bit shy and all that kind of thing. So there were very slightly awkward conversations. I didn't really felt like I knew him very well. So I'd be back home working on the book. And one of the reasons I came off of G.I. Joe was because I'd got a young family then, and my son, who's the middle of our 3 kids, he was probably about 4, 5 years old, maybe 4, maybe a little bit older than that, 6, say. Anyway, so I was working in my studio at home. Not this one. This isn't at home. This is in town. But in the house we used to live in, I was working in my studio at the bottom of the garden. And my son Frank, he came into the studio one sort of sunny day while I was drawing G.I. Joe. And he was like, "What are you doing, Dad?" And I'm like, "I'm drawing." "What are you drawing, Dad?" "Comics." "What comic is it, Dad?" "G.I. Joe." And he came and had a look. "What are they doing?" And I said, "They're fighting." "Are they? What are they doing?" "They've got, what's that?" "Oh, it's a gun." And I immediately felt uncomfortable that I was talking about firearms and violence with my 6-year-old son. And I just thought, this don't feel right to me. So I, shortly after that, I came off of the book. It just didn't feel appropriate. But then interestingly, when I met Larry at Rollout Roll
Which
Call,
was probably 2012 or 2014.
Okay.
He was there twice.
Yeah. So by that time, I'm a proper grown up, and kids grown up and all that kind of thing. And so we had a great chat. It was different. It was very, very relaxed, all that kind of thing. And we were kind of catching up a bit. And I think I probably relayed that story to him, and he was slightly taken aback. And then he explained to me his whole kind of ethos with G.I. Joe, and how, to a large extent, he's like a pacifist, and it had more thinking in it, and it wasn't about violence and all that kind of thing. And I was so pleased that I'd had that conversation with him, because it kind of dispelled a ghost for me in a way. It made me feel as though my work on it was valid after all, personally, So that was interesting. It was really nice to meet him. And then I met him again, it was last year or the year before. I was at a convention in Texas. I was invited to go over to Texas to the convention there. Larry was one of the guests, and it was great. We had a great laugh. It was really good to meet him. Yeah, nice guy. And he gave me one of his little coin things that he gives to the select few, these little... Yeah. Like, thanks. Yeah.
The trauma of seeing Dad working on the board and drawing the guns must be partially offset, but at least by your care package that you received from was it Marvel or Hasbro that sent it to you? That sounds like it was a delightful moment.
What was that?
The day that you received in the post a box full of toys.
Oh, that one, that story. Yeah. Yeah, they're all the G.I. Joe toys. So that was, I don't know when that would have been. Anyway, yeah, so while I was working on the book, and Bobby Chase was the editor at Marvel, and I mean, I was working from whatever reference I could get. I didn't really have an awful lot. This is the comics, that's largely it. Some other reference, but that was enough. That was fine. And yeah, I was at home, and the doorbell rang, and I opened the door, and there was literally a cardboard box with legs. And I was like, what the hell is this? But it was a guy holding this box in front of him, but all you could see of him was his legs sticking out underneath. Massive box, and it was like, delivery, okay, great. So I signed for it, poured it in, and so I thought, what the hell is this? So I opened it, and it was a ton of G.I. Joe toys, like helicopter and vehicles and loads of the characters, all fully boxed, and packaged and everything like that. I was like, wow, this is incredible. And my son then, because he was so young, he was just like shaking with excitement, like, all of his potential Christmases had come at once. And I was like, no, they're mine. They're my toys. Don't you? No, you can't take them out of the packs. He wants to take them out and play with them. I was like, oh, no, can't do that. This daddies, this is work. This is
this is work.
Like, what?
Really?
Yeah.
Is it though?
But I'm sure a week later, there were key ones that I kept in the studio as reference, and then the rest of them, just gradually over time. Oh yeah, all right, you can have that one. Oh yeah, all right, you can have that one. So he was probably the only kid in the UK that had that amount of G.I.JOE toys. But it was amazing to have. I mean, for them to, to go to that trouble, and then for me to have those vehicles and like, oh right, yeah, and you could hold up figures and just get cool. Right, I got it now. I've got the angle, I've got the perspective, I've got the size comparison. Brilliant.
It's a good reminder because nowadays we all assume that there is going to be a website, or you just go to eBay and you can see the front and back of sort of everything and anything, but I was drawing some Transformers fan comics in 1993 and I didn't have those toys, and I had the Transformers Universe 4-issue miniseries, which was the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. You just have like a front drawing of each character. And I had to draw Optimus Prime from behind. And I thought, well, I can guess, but I'm going to guess wrong. So I pulled out a VHS tape and I had to find a scene and press pause and like sketch from the TV. And then like the next scene in the comic has like Wheeljack from behind. It's like, well, he's not in this scene and I don't have the toy, and you only see the front of him in this like comic redraw of the animation model sheet. And it's comics artists who have joined us on the show who said that thing, it takes 3 or 4 issues to get sort of comfortable drawing with the character. Some of that is like emotional, like just sort of feeling confident that they know the character. Like, well, how would the character stand when they're upset or when they're defiant? Because it's not all archetypes, but a lot of it is just the nuts and bolts of like, okay, this character has shoulder pads and like a bandolier. What happens back here? There are pouches on the front. Are there pouches on the back? Compared to the budget that Hasbro was spending on television advertisements and marketing and like the tooling of the toys, sending a box of toys to one guy, even across the Atlantic, was a small investment. So
yeah, I remember I spoke to Bobby about that afterwards when she was probably at a convention in the UK or something, and I spoke to her and said, "Wow, all the toys!" And she was like, "Yeah, you're welcome," And she said, "Yeah, we got a ton of those things." And she said that I don't know if it was that year or 1 year very close to that, because she was editor on the book. I think she just moved into a new apartment and she wanted to put up a Christmas tree. Hadn't got any decorations. She decorated it with G.I.JOE characters. There's just a whole bunch of them around,
Andrew, a question that we sometimes ask at the beginning of a show is, can you tell us a little bit about the space that you're in? You said that this is your studio. I see Craig Thompson's blankets and I see Barry Windsor Smith's monsters. What is this space? How? Oh, I see the white llama. Oh, I see the Incal. Okay, what is this space? Sorry, Andrew. I own a comic book store, so it is my job to look at spines of books from a distance and know what they are, if we have them or not. But more generally. How long have you had this space? What is that thing you're pointing to? Oh, are those the stamps? Are those the Transformer stamps?
Yeah.
So this is your studio. Tell us about your studio. What's
I wish I could give you a tour, but I can't. So this studio is the top floor. It's essentially in the attic, above a pub right in the centre of a little market town called Chipping Norton. So
above a pub, you say?
Above a pub, yes. And they do very nice lunches, yeah. So for a lot of time, like a lot of people, I used to work at home in a spare bedroom, that kind of thing. and then I needed to. That kind of didn't work. And one house we lived in, the one where I said when I was doing G.I.JOE, I had it's an old house, and there was a reasonable sized garden, and at the end of the garden there was some old like stables, like an L-shaped stable block, and I had that all converted into a studio. Well, half of it had to be taken down because it was so, dilapidated, but the rest of it, I had it all turned into a studio, insulated, nice doors, windows, all that kind of thing. Set up my drum kit. So I worked in there, but I always wanted to have a studio not in the house, because family, work and life just mesh together too much. And this was one of those. This isn't the first studio I've ever had away from home, but this is one of those. So it's in the town that I live in, within walking distance. But yeah, it's an old building. The building itself is probably 19th century. Parts of it are probably 18th century. And so they're basically offices, and they've got this big attic space, which I know the lady that owns it, because she owned the pub, and they found it hard to rent out. And I knew that it had become vacant again. And one of the things that makes it hard to rent out is because it's got like beams and things. You don't have much upright wall space. You can see a bit of the pitch of the ceiling here. That goes up to a beam there. So that's an inconvenience for people that want to use it as an office. You can stand up full height in it, but the edges it's a bit challenging. And the floors, because it's such an old building, they go like this. So all the desks and stuff like that have all got like wooden blocks at one end just to hold it level. But it's a wonderful space. It is like an artist's garret. It's fantastic. It's quite large. I'm sitting right at one end of it. It's probably, I don't know, 20 foot long, probably. Yeah. So I'm just right at one end of it. And my wife, who's an artist and a writer, she's got her bit up at the end of that. So. But I'm moving out of here soon. So I've recently moved into a different house, and because the kids are all grown up, left home, married, all that kind of stuff. We've just bought a new house, and we are now, after wanting to separate life and work for so many years, we're now blending, life and art together a bit more. So we're going to work and live in the same kind of space. So.
And if you're sharing a studio space with your wife, it sounds like part of that is happening anyway.
Yeah. She's not here all that often, but she used to co-own a shop in one of the little sort of old sort of side roads here in Chipping Norton, a yarn shop where they sold, yarn and all sorts of craft things. Not that was her thing, but as an artist, she got to know another artist who was well into that and always wanted to open a shop like that. So they got into business together. So I used to have the top room there, but it was tiny. And then my wife sold her share in the shop, and I got on really well with the other lady there. And I was there for probably another year. And I said, I think I'm going to move on. I need more space. And myself and Leslie, my wife, we thought, well, if we're going to get a space, let's get a space together, so we can do what we do. But she's not here all that often, and I'm in here gradually less and less often. Soon to decamp to home, so that'll probably be within. I've handed in my notice on my lease here, so I shall be out of here. I've got to be out of here by the end of the month, so we've just got into August, so I've got 3 weeks, just under 3 weeks probably, to be out, pack up and get out. And there's a lot of stuff in here.
Can we imagine a drafting table, a computer, a scanner, a printer, more books, ink and pencils and paper, and then some of the previous
plan chests full of art and art supplies. And I've got two desks here. Leslie's got one big long desk, and there are cupboards with stuff in and boxes of stuff and boxes of copies of Horizon and Oxygen for mail out, and loads of it. Guitars, as you've seen. Lots of old artwork, not just my stuff, but there's like canvases, and there's a lot going on in here.
With a resurgence in popularity of the 1992 X-Men cartoon because of the new X-Men cartoon on Disney Plus. Have you gotten? I noticed that X-Men animated omnibus behind you. Have you gotten any particular attention for having drawn an X-Men cartoon tie-in comic some years ago?
Yeah,
Recently?
I have. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that that was happening, and suddenly I was getting a few emails, people saying, "Have you got any of your X-Men Adventures artwork?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And I put some up for sale, and I suddenly thought, "Hang on a minute." So I started racking up the prices a bit. I've never sold art for a huge amount of money at all, but some of those, I thought I'm not going to let them go too lightly. Because as I've sold art apart from having to get rid of all my G.I. Joe and Transformers artwork to pay for weddings for my daughters, the rest of it has gradually gone over the years, but there are some pages that I won't get rid of and covers that I won't get rid of. But I mean, there are two covers that I've had people offer a lot of money for, which makes me. Are you going to guess which two they are?
The Wolverine and Sabretooth one. Is it issue?
Yeah,
Is it issue 4?
Six.
Issue 6. Cold Comfort.
So yes, so I've had a lot of people ask me for that one, but I'm never going to sell it. I don't care how much anyone offers me, And the other one is issue. It's not one. It's the Venom cover that's been homaged a few times, where Carnage is pulling the mask off of Eddie Brock. Like that.
That's been used as a cover for collections twice, both for the Venom Carnage Unleashed sort of collection and the Venom Epic collection that's subtitled Carnage Unleashed.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people after that one, and I'm like, no. If I want to leave any legacy, it's just a handful of pieces that I'm not. My kids want to sell them when I'm dead. It's up to them, but I don't want to. I want to leave something that stood the test of time. Like the fact that people are after those. I mean, obviously there's the collector things come into fashion and then drop out of fashion or whatever. But some of those things, I think that's the mark that I left. Even if I didn't, you don't know that at the time. But so I storyboarded the Luther movie that Netflix did, the Luther movie that came out, and Andy Serkis was the villain in it. And I was talking to Jamie, and he said to me, I told Andy Serkis that the guy that storyboarded the Netflix movie was used to draw the Venom comics, and he was like, "What?" Couldn't believe it. It was like, "What? Who is it?"
Because Andy Serkis directed the second Venom movie.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And so when they were filming the Luther movie, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but there's like a big pivotal scene in Piccadilly Circus at night, and it's where Luther and Roby, which is the Andy Serkis character, have this face-off kind of thing, and they invited me, the production staff, they invited me to be an extra on that night shoot. So when there's this whole face-off at Piccadilly Circus by the statue with Eros, the fountain with Eros statue on the top, I was at that statue watching them do this thing. So I was an extra in it. And then in between one of the shots, Andy Serkis came up and we had a little chat, and he was like, "Oh man," he said, "I can't believe you're the guy that storyboarded this movie." He said, "We referenced your 4-issue Carnage Unleashed so much when we were making the movie." And I was like, "Oh my God, like really?" And I got a credit at the end of the movie. There was lots of with thanks to, for the creators of Venom and all that kind of thing. And I was, lucky enough to be included in that. And I thought, that really means something, that something you've done has stood the test of time and been referenced and homaged and whatever. So I'm very proud of that. Yeah.
I think it's remarkable that artists and writers who have contributed to certain brands, like people are crazy about Avengers, but there's no Avengers convention.
Yeah.
But there are G.I. Joe conventions and Transformers conventions, and I think it's funny that I think it's fun that people who were in comics for, some of the 90s, their work stays in print, even though sort of back then Marvel was publishing as much, Spider-Man and Venom, as it could. And that's the stuff which sticks around. That's the stuff that gets referenced.
Yeah. And I think the longevity of, like, who knew at the time, when I didn't even want to draw robots for sure, I was quite happy to get onto G.I. Joe because it was real people. Because I was just felt so blessed to be working for Marvel, having been a huge Marvel Comics fan when I was younger. I didn't want to draw robots, but it was the stepping stone to hopefully eventually drawing the proper books, So G.I. Joe was a step along that way. But I gave it all the love I could, I really got into it. And now we know that I was fortunate enough to work with, even though they were just toy books, as even some other editors at Marvel said to me, they're just toy books. Are we still doing that book, But Simon Furman and Larry Hama, I mean, come on, if anyone deserves applause for their ability to create worlds and scenarios, those guys have done it, and they've done something that's lasted the test of time. And also, I think the other thing in this very, very digital, screen-oriented age that we live in, the fact that G.I. Joe and Transformers is still relevant is an absolute testament to the power of play value, because they were toys. People, like grown-ups now, remember the visceral experience they had playing with those toys. And that, I think that's why they have stood the test of time. And like I say, with Derek Ritchie, the producer on Luther season 5, the connection I have now is with guys who grew up. Oh, I used to read your comics when I was a kid, but they only read the comics because they played with the toys, and it's all still here.
Yeah, it's the sort of the simpatico between the two. It's sort of one building on the other. The comics, had more weight because they were, the sort of bringing these little plastic things to life, and not just making them into real characters, and creating stories in your head that can then, live on in your own games outside of that. So it wasn't just a, here's the latest thing, for this month, and that's it. It would live on because you're experiencing it in another way, and sort of one plays off the other, and sort of brought a weight to each that probably wouldn't have existed without the other.
Yeah, and I think as the audience grew up, with those properties, they had writers of caliber that took it seriously. They weren't just writing toy books; they were writing, major sweeping dramas.
There are other, at Marvel and at other publishers, there were other comics that weren't G.I. Joe and Transformers by Hama and Furman that were based on toys and outside properties that they were okay, but you can read them and they don't stay with you as much, and they're not reprinted as much, or they're not looked back upon as fondly as much. Rather than phrase it as a question, because I think as a freelance artist who likes to work, I'll phrase this as a statement. If Skybound approaches you and queries you to draw anything for their new and current G.I. Joe or Transformers comics, that gets my thumbs up, Andrew Wildman.
Yeah, don't know.
Oh,
well,
you're busy. You've done it before.
There are exceptions to that. It's like when IDW, after I did a series of 6 covers of standalone characters, I mean, when they asked me to do those a few years ago now.
For Transformers, this was the first.
This was for Transformers, yeah.
The first Transformers miniseries they did.
Okay, was that? Oh, yeah. So they asked me to do some covers, and I was like, don't really do Transformers anymore. I was working in TV, But I thought, well, you know what? I will. This might be quite fun. I said, I'll do them as long as it could be one character, just one character on that cover, no story, just like, a hero shot of each character, just almost kind of like a iconic depiction of that character that I know and love and respect. So they agreed, and I did those, and that was great. And then it wasn't long after that they came back and said, so what would it take? They said, what would it take to get you to do some interior artwork, as long as it's not money, or as long as it's not inflated, page rate? I said, no, I get it. It's a licensed book. And I initially I said no, and they pushed, and then I said, okay, I'll only do it if I can work with Simon. I don't want to work with another writer on Transformers. There's no point. And I'll only do it if we can do something that just has some weight, some meaning, some gravitas to it, because that for me is what the book was about, and has the potential to be more of. And then that sort of ended up in keying in with the whole Transformers 81 campaign that had been running, which is to carry on with the Marvel storyline and see it through. So that's what we did. So that was worth doing it for that.
Regeneration 1.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
yes,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So Regeneration 1 started at issue sort of 81.
Oh yes. Okay. Sorry. I thought you were doing a year. I thought you were doing
no. Yeah. There was this campaign for Transformers 81. I carry on from Marvel.
Right.
So I did that, and that was great. Although I did run out of time because I had other shows that I was working on, and then so they got Guido to finish off the book, which was
then
fine.
you came back for 100, and it was like a victorious return, because all three of you did issue 100.
Yeah, so that was nice. Yeah, I don't know that I'd do any more Transformers interior stuff, covers. Yeah, probably G.I. Joe, same thing. I'd do covers, but I wouldn't do, like I did the Scarlet thing. I wouldn't do interiors again. No, I don't think I would. I mean, they have approached me to do something which I have done, but it's not interior work. So for G.I. Joe, so
interesting. Vague.
I think we can guess.
I think you can probably guess.
Yeah. Mark, I'm out of questions.
Yeah, I think I am too. So I think we can just ask Andrew if there's anything that you wanted to promote or point people towards.
Sorry, can you give us a specific pitch for your self-published, creator-owned works, besides just like, here's your website? Like sell our viewers on your wonderful self-published books.
Yeah. So I happen to have one to hand. Yeah, so Horizon and Oxygen. So the thing about Oxygen, which was originally released in separate issues, is now a fully collected work. I did a Kickstarter campaign to do a hardback version, which was done, but it's now complete. The whole 7 chapters in there. My pitch for both of these books, although they're not the first and second part of anything. Horizon is very different genre to Oxygen, if anything else. Horizon's more a kind of, I guess, bit more of a European style emotional drama, but it's kind of fantasy based. It does have robots in it. Oxygen is very definitely sci-fi, and it's full color, which Horizon is only part color, more pages, but it's very definitely sci-fi. But the thing that they both have, and the reason I did them, which is what I always try to get people to kind of, get a sense of and get into and get inspired by, is that for various reasons, back in the day, I had certain sort of problems in my work life and personal life, whatever, and I had coaching and all sorts of stuff to help get through that. I then did some coach training. I then coached on different personal development seminars and things. And these days I get asked to, or hired to, go in and do inspirational lectures to sometimes older school age children, but into universities and, you know, the film school in England and all that kind of stuff. Initially to talk about my work, obviously, because they want to hear about comics, they want to hear about film and all that kind of thing. But I use those as an access point to inspire them with some of the key things that I learned in coaching in terms of dealing with self-esteem, or just if there's, you know, things that you want to achieve in your life and what's the best way to handle that emotionally. Like, what space do you have to get yourself into to be able to deal with the challenges of life and, you know, and continue on an upward kind of thing. And so those kind of, some of those coaching things, those inspirational things, those ways of thinking and ways of engaging with your own self, I get into those lectures, but that's the point of Horizon, and that's the point of Oxygen. Inside a very accessible narrative with a character on a journey. It's not a quest as such, but it's a singular linear journey. They encounter certain things, and inside of the challenges they meet there is, just through the way that it's played out and with the mentor character that appears in both of them. So Horizon, the main character, the protagonist, is a 15-year-old girl that ends up in a dream world, and she takes with her favorite soft toy, which is essentially this character, who's called Moon in the story, and he comes to life in the dream world, and he's the mentor character. In Oxygen, it's an astronaut who's stranded on a planet. He doesn't know why he's there. He has no memory of who he is or why he's there. And his mentor guide character is like this globular sort of droid character that, you know, follows him around and guides him. But he doesn't know what the destination is, and the droid doesn't tell him, even though the droid is guiding him to get to the destination, because that's where he needs to get to. So I won't give away the ending, but that kind of sets up the linear narrative. And then within everything that they encounter, it's designed to inspire and empower the reader. So whichever genre is the one that you... in fact, when I was first selling Horizon, because that came out a long time before Oxygen did, when I was first selling Horizon, I noticed two things. One was the people that picked it up, they might be inspired by my pitch. They might be inspired by the artwork because they kind of liked it or whatever, or they just take a punt on it. The number of people that then got in touch with me afterwards and said, "Oh my God," like, you know, even like grown men would say, the bit where she's doing it, that touched me so much, from something I remember from my childhood, you know, that it kind of inspired them. But I noticed that a lot of people would look at Horizon, flick through it, and they said, "What it's about?" And I say, "Well, it's about a 15-year-old girl, da 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 da," and they put it down and walk on, because largely I was a very male orientated kind of sci-fi comics convention, so they weren't really, that wasn't their genre that they were interested in. So I thought, okay, I need to do something similar for that audience, for the kind of male sci-fi audience. So although it's very, very different, it's essentially the same intention, but inside a different genre. And the same thing happens. People read it and they're like, "Wow, I didn't see that coming," you know.
You have always drawn comics, scripts, and storyboards from writers and screenwriters who are other people. And with these two books, you are the writer.
Yeah.
And the artist and the color artist and the letterer and the designer and the publisher.
Yeah.
How does it feel, or how did you get to this step of also writing these?
Well, with Horizon originally, it was a different story, but the intention of the narrative was, I knew what I wanted the flavor to be, and I knew what the things were that I wanted to say in it. But I came up with a slightly different scenario, and I asked Simon if he would write it. If I plotted it, would he write it, just to make it work, you know, as a narrative? And he felt it wasn't for him. I spoke to, I don't know if you heard of a writer called Jason Cobley, who I met through the small press kind of, you know, area, and he'd written a number of things. When I first met him, we clicked in so many ways, mostly over music, actually similar music tastes. So I spoke to him about it, and he absolutely loved it. The music similarity we had, we were both fans of a band called Marillion. You probably heard of Marillion. Most people know the old single Kaylee, but that's many years ago. And he was a fan of them, and I said, I want to use Marillion lyrics in it. And I spoke to the band, and they were keen on the project. And then for whatever reason, he then said, I can't, this needs to be written by you. He said, the stuff you're telling me is so personally driven that you need to write it. Anyway, I was in a pub in London one evening with various people, and the people were just milling around and whatever. And I was eventually sitting at a table with Simon and a writer-artist called Sarah McIntyre, and she writes children's books mostly, and she's like award-winning. She's wonderful young lady that I'd met through a comic that we both worked on, a kids comic. And I was talking to her, saying I can't find a writer for this. I told her what the story was, and she said, well, you got to write it yourself. And I said, and when she said, you need to write it yourself, Simon burst out laughing. And I said, hear that? I'm an artist, I'm not a writer. And she said, don't be ridiculous. These are your characters. You are, they are essentially extension of you. You know what the story is. You just need to put the words in their mouth. It's not like you're writing a novel. You just need to put the words in their mouth. So I thought I'd give it a go. And I was amazed at how natural it was to do. My approach to developing them was not to sit down and write like proper writers, like Simon would or Larry, I didn't just sit down and think it and write it. I sat down and I bullet pointed the scenes that I wanted to hit. And then I'd just start to draw little thumbnails of pages. Yeah, that's not right. Yeah, that'd fit, so I could see it almost like a movie. And then when they felt right, I would start to, so it's almost like plot style, but I was doing it visually. And then I would just start to play with the dialogue, and it just happened naturally. So anyone who thinks they're not a writer, but they're an artist, I would say just, if it's your own project, it'll work, You're a creative, just kind of do it. And bless Sarah, I did, and it's got good results and great reviews. I mean, Horizon, when I first started, I sent it to a few people, like Dave Gibbons, got back to me and with a quote. I said, can I quote you on this? And he was like, yeah. So he sent me the quote. Will Gompertz, the BBC arts editor, who now runs the Barbican, I think. Yeah, I did a radio show with him, and he was like, this is amazing. And he wrote me a quote. Des Skin, beautiful stuff. Andrea Tran, who's a 4 times BAFTA winning children's animation director. He was just like, well, his quote was, wow, very clever, sir, very clever indeed, And he said, I didn't see that end coming like that. And then a more recent one was Alain de Botton, I don't know if you know, philosopher and broadcaster. I sent him a copy, and he was like, this is beautiful. And that was his quote, beautiful. And that just really touched me, that people, would respond that way.
Mm.
So that's the access point, really. If you want something with heart and feeling, and that will potentially give you a way of engaging with your own life in a way that possibly you hadn't seen before, to empower you, then give it a go.
And the best way for people to access the content, get hold of it, is it direct to you via your website or at a convention, or is there other routes in there?
Certainly at a convention. I'm kind of all over the internet, so people can get in touch with me on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But I've got a website, but I've distilled the essence of what I do now into an online platform. The website address of which is a bit sort of annoyingly complicated, as they often are, but the web address andrewwildman.art will point you straight there. So andrewwildman.art is the place that you can talk to me, get copies of that, sketch commissions, prints, whatever. So and it's essentially a kind of a blog / people can comment and whatever.
The URL that Mark has had up for the last little bit under you, that is also a website of yours, apwildman.com.
Yes, that's my main website. Yeah, but from there you can find the other one as well.
Yeah, I think if you click on blog, that takes you to the Andrew Wildman Arts.
Yeah, it's the Ko-fi
link, which
blog,
is the Ko-fi link. Yeah.
And it's just a really beautiful little sort of platform to be able to use to engage with people and do updates and set up commissions and stuff as well. So.
Mm-hmm. And have you got any conventions in the diary for this coming year?
Yeah, end of this month I'm at TF Nation, where myself and Simon will be announcing something.
That's in the States?
No, it's in the UK.
Okay.
It's not a comic. we just have a little announcement we're going to make. And then I'm also at the Lakes Festival in the Lake District in end of September, I think that is. But that's it for this year.
Yeah, beautiful place for a convention.
Yeah, so in terms of conventions, unless I get invited to whatever, the ones that I actually aim for myself, which in some ways feel like a better fit, certainly for Oxygen and Horizon, are the Lakes and Thought Bubble.
Mm-hmm. Are you planning to be at Thought Bubble this year?
Not this year, no. Maybe next year. I've just moved house. I've got too much going on.
It sounds like the next 3 weeks you've got some studio packing to do.
You're going to make him cry.
And then some studio unpacking.
We're also having building work done at the house, so I'm perfectly having to time the building of the new room that's going to be the studio at the house with getting out of here. So at the house, the door that goes from the hallway into the studio was literally knocked through today. So what could possibly go wrong,
So I think all that remains is to say thank you so much for joining us, for being so generous with your time and discussing G.I. Joe, Transformers, and more. Yeah, time's flown by, and me and Tim will do our normal flick through review. I think probably the next episode. If you are new to Talking Joe, talkingjoe.co.uk is the website. Find us there. For more, big thank you as always to our Patreon subscribers for supporting us, getting early access to content such as this tiny bit before everyone else. That's patreon.com/talkingjoe. And Tim can be found in a variety of places too.
My brick and mortar comic shop near Boston is Hub Comics. Video essays on TV and film at youtube.com/Atomic Abe Productions. And I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
Perfect. So that just remains us to say that see you next time. And until then, Tim.
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Latest.
Nice one.